Chapter 2, July's Highs. Just stay calm, I told myself. Address the problem in a level-headed way. I wasn't aware that you smoked, I managed to croak. Oh, not cigarettes. I never touch cigarettes. Those things will kill ya. Uh-huh. I do love the ganja, though. There it was. Do you like the ganja? I heard Alfred Jackman ask me as I tried to slow my hyperventilating. Okay, take control. I could handle this. Or I could run. I caught sight of Ralph still laughing by the metal detector. He gave me a thumbs up. No, Mr. Jackman, I don't like the ganja, I replied in a voice so high-strung it vibrated. Was I being totally honest here? Too bad. I've got top-grade quality stuff from Canada. You should try it. I needed to sit down for a couple months. I thought you went to Canada for your Lipitor and Nexium and the other prescription drugs you need, I flung at him accusingly. That's what you told me. That's what I signed up for. He looked a little hurt, in a really stoned way. I do, he replied, but the pot's real cheap too, and it helps with the pain. I grasped at any remaining reserves of sympathy deep within me. This old man was in pain most of the time, that was the bottom line, and our country's lack of adequate Medicare drug benefits was making his few remaining years a stressed-out nightmare. If he got a little TLC and a doobie packed with THC, maybe that wasn't such a terrible thing. I tried to look at this crisis with fresh, less vengeful eyes. Cracker Jacks will be fine if you don't have nachos, he offered. My BlackBerry was buzzing a hole through my hip, and I knew before I even checked my watch that it was past 9:30. The hearing had started. I had to do something. As the press pool approached the checkpoint, I took Cheech Sr. by the elbow and led him firmly toward the committee holding room. When we passed by the double doors of the Russell caucus room, I saw the chairman in the midst of his opening remarks to the crowded, camera-filled room. The other senators were fanned out on either side of him, their dark suits and somber expressions forming a humongous, high-powered arc. Before we can make it past, RG looked straight at me. I registered the concerned expression in his eyes with a bottomless sinking feeling. It took all my strength to muster up a confident smile, but he didn't look comforted. Which wasn't that surprising, since according to a vast amount of photographic evidence, my attempts at fake smiles made me look like a drunken stroke victim, which would have made me only a slightly better candidate for testimony than Alfred Jackman. We were at the door to the adjacent holding room. I turned to my Stone Age stoner and was overpowered anew by the pungent marijuana smell that seemed to be cascading out of his pores. For the first time, I realized there was no saving the situation. He could not go in there and testify no matter how compelling his story was. And what should have been a major victory for RG was about to be rendered an utter disaster. Crap. Instead of leading him into the holding room, I steered Alfred Jackman further down the hall to a private restroom. If he hadn't been so out of it, he might have been confused as to where I was taking him. As it was, he seemed preoccupied with the effects that the cocktail of pot and prescription drugs was unleashing on his system. He shuffled alongside me happily, pointing out the purple dots he claimed were filling up the hall like warm, shiny bubbles. And there's one right on your nose like a big violet mole, he said, as he lightly touched my face with his 83-year-old thoroughly drugged finger. Thanks, I'll remember to get that checked out at the dermatologist, I replied, as I wrestled with the restroom's large window. It finally gave and opened up enough to allow room for an over-medicated old man and a soon-to-be-fired healthcare advisor to climb through. Please let there be a cab. Please let there be a cab. I prayed to the taxi guide as I assisted Alfred Jackman with his landing on the sidewalk outside. In moments of stress, I often turn to a stable of very specific gods in the hopes that they might hear my direct and heartfelt appeals. How often did a deity like the taxi god get prayed to? I counted on him rewarding my attention with a little love. Like manna from heaven, a cab came to a stop directly in front of us as we completed our window escape. I helped Alfred Jackman into the back seat and watched the cab driver wrinkle his nose in the rearview mirror. He's very old and not feeling well, I officiously explained. Could you please take him back to his room at the Hyatt Regency at New Jersey and Constitution Aves? The driver responded with an extremely bored shrug. Alfred Jackman turned to me. Are we taking a ride to the hearing? He asked, while batting away some sort of imaginary atmospheric pattern he discovered in the cab's interior. The hearing's postponed till tomorrow. I'll stop by your hotel this afternoon to go over the new schedule, okay? I smiled brightly at him. He patted my hand. Sure, he said. However, I can be helpful, sweetheart. No, really, you've already done too much. I handed the cab driver my last $10 bill until I cashed this week's paycheck, parentheses, which would then provide me with only slightly more than $10, good old government gets salary, close parentheses, and sent the dynamic duo on their way. Ralph was screening a tour group and only had time to give me an odd look as I burst through the front door moments later. Even if he'd been unoccupied, I doubted he would have asked me many questions. Despite our metro ride bonding, I was essentially just one of a legion of young staffers. He watched pass through these halls year after year. As long as I didn't set off any alarms, he really couldn't care less why I was re-entering the building when I was allegedly currently inside it. I rushed into the hearing room just as the chairman was saying, perhaps we won't be hearing us testimony from Mr. Alfred Jackman after all. For the last time, is Mr. Jackman or any of his representatives present? I felt RG's eyes latch onto me like a hawk's, but I couldn't look at him. Taking a big gulp of sweaty committee room air, I approached the microphone on the table facing the panel of senators. Even completely sober, it was terrifyingly surreal to sense a room full of policymakers and journalists focus all their important attention on me. Mr. Jackman's been taken ill, I squeaked in a high-pitched, traumatized voice. Not the crisp, drippingly intelligent tone I had always felt sure I'd be able to deliver in such a moment. And on top of it, I was shaking. Fabulous. We're sorry to hear that, boomed the chairman. I dug my nails into my legs to try to stop the quivering before it provoked concern for my well-being. Yes, I heard myself continuing. He was present and prepared to testify, but suddenly experienced unfortunate side effects from the medicine he had taken for his condition. Okay, so far no lying. I begged the god of persuasive explanations to smile upon me. As the committee may be aware, Mr. Jackman has to travel to Canada to obtain the drugs he desperately needs to manage his intense pain. He's 83 years old, and this sort of stress leads easily to exhaustion. Despite that, he was looking forward to sharing his experience with the committee today, in the hopes that he could play a small role in improving the lives of the millions of his fellow senior citizens who are imploring their representatives here in D.C. to provide them with a comprehensive prescription drug benefit plan. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw some reporters scribbling rapidly in their pads. Could I really pull this off? However, despite his best intentions, Mr. Jackman was in no shape to testify this morning. That's for sure. Given the circumstances, he hoped he might be able to postpone his testimony until tomorrow. I stopped talking at last and held my breath. Perhaps it would have been a better idea to keep breathing regularly, but I was too nervous. And I had been the reigning champion of the lunch table hold your breath contest in 5th grade, so I felt fairly confident I could wait out the response without losing consciousness. The chairman adjusted his reading glasses and cleared his throat. Was I turning blue yet? I was a bit out of practice. This committee hopes Mr. Jackman feels better and looks forward to his testimony tomorrow morning, the chairman intoned. Sweet, sweet breath. Ugh, stagnant air. I'd forgotten about that, but the important and unbelievable thing was that disaster had been narrowly averted. I nodded to the panel and backed away from the microphone, doing a victory dance in my head. I should probably have held off from the mental celebration because my lack of total concentration on backwards walking led me to tripping over a camera table and tumbling sideways onto a row of seated journalists. An extremely plump, middle-aged AP reporter broke most of my fall, and my flailing arm managed to clock a young man from the Washington Post sitting next to him in the face. I heard RG quickly ask a chairman a procedural question and silently thanked him for directing attention away from the crash. Oh gosh, I'm so sorry, I whispered to my victims as I regained control of my splayed limbs and renegotiated my relationship with the gravity. No problem, didn't feel a thing, the rotund reporter winked at me. I believed him, but his neighbor didn't seem so unscathed. He had a nasty scratch on the side of his otherwise handsome face, and his glasses were somewhere on the floor beneath his chair. It was clear from his distressed expression and blind man feeling his way. Arm movements that he couldn't see a thing without him. I hurried to help him, stepping hard on his foot in the process, and not with the soft, bright red sneaker, but with the unforgiving, sharp-heeled sandal. He yelped in pain and swatted at me, trying to defend himself from this crazed enemy combatant who had come out of nowhere, intent on mauling him. I knew that's how I had come off, but I was really trying to redeem myself. I located his black rimmed glasses and placed them placatingly in his hand. I am so sorry, I tried again. He put on his glasses and turned towards me, revealing himself to look remarkably like Clark Kent. I felt my heart race a bit as our eyes met, and I struggled to remind myself that despite the physical similarity, I wasn't really in the presence of a disguised superhero. Was I? The fact that he was a reporter prevented me from finding him too attractive. Reporters weren't my type. It's okay, don't worry about it, he said unconvincingly. Oh no, I've cut you, I replied as I noticed the scratch on his face was beginning to bleed. I'd actually drawn blood. How horrifying. I glared down at my fingernails accusingly. That was no way to treat Clark Kent. I'm fine, he muttered dismissively, flipping through his notebook and finding another pen in his jacket pocket. He turned his attention back to the committee hearing, leaving me to stare helplessly at his scratched and distracted profile while Senator Rawlings' thick southern accent launched into a diatribe about Medicare somewhere behind me. As Clark Kent scribbled down some notes, I felt an overwhelming urge to touch the script on his face. I had a tissue in my pocket. Could I just blot away the blood? Probably not without asking first. Can I at least get you a Band-Aid or something? I whispered into his ear. I really need to hear this, he replied in a distinctly annoyed tone. Oh gosh, he hated me. Oh, right. Well, sorry again, I stammered at his turned away shoulder. See you around. I felt myself blush a deep scarlet as I fled the room. At least that meant I was matching half my footwear. I still hadn't recovered at 5:30 that afternoon when it was time to accompany RG to the American Foundation for AIDS Research reception at the Washington Hilton. An afternoon visit to Alfred Jackman's room had discovered him passed out, surrounded by minibar wrappers. I managed to convince him to hand over the remainder of his stash until he finished with his testimony by swearing I would be personally responsible for its safekeeping. The brief victory rush had been immediately replaced by paralyzing anxiety when I realized I had voluntarily taken possession of a large Ziploc bag full of grade A Canadian weed. I was acutely aware of its presence in the innermost pocket of the bag my trusting grandmother had given me for Christmas. As I hurried with RG towards the waiting tinted window sedan, I swore I heard the rustling of leaves and plastic as I walked, and I imagined everyone nearby could also hear it, as well as instantly discern what it was. I felt like the agitated protagonist in an updated Poe's The Telltale Heart. In this version, revised for the slacker crowd, my contraband bag of weed would rustle loud enough to drive me mad and reveal my crime. I was feeling queasy as I settled into the car beside Archie. "How's Mr. Jackman feeling?" he asked me with a raised eyebrow as the car pulled out of the Russell Building parking lot and into traffic. Archie knew something was up, but he didn't want to know the details, which, given what they were, was just fine with me. "He'll be fine tomorrow, sir. There's nothing to worry about. I'm sorry about the delay." "Good," was the terse reply. No need for further discussion. Archie had far more on his plate than a few items that concerned my area of expertise. He demanded intelligence and efficiency, and normally I was up to the task, if just barely. So far today, I had come up a little short. I took out the AMFAR folder. I've got the guest list with the people that need some extra attention highlighted. For example, Nick Simon's been feeling neglected. He mentioned something about not putting our money where our mouth was, and I assured him. RG interrupted me, "Samantha." I looked up from my piles of briefs. "Yes, sir?" "Are you okay?" he asked a little gruffly. Oh gosh, he was pointing my bag. He knew. Had he recognized the rustling? Had Alfred Jackman squawked? That was it. I was fired. "Sir, I know this looks bad, but I'd like you to know that I've only smoked pot 5 times in my life, and the last time was over 8 years ago, and I never even liked it because I couldn't remember really basic things the next day, like my phone number, and I've never ever done anything else except for drinking, but only in a fairly responsible way." RG looked at me with an utterly bewildered expression. "You've got a nasty bruise." I looked to where he was pointing at a yellowish mottled mark on my arm just below the shoulder strap in my bag. I knew where it had come from. Clark Kent's sharp belt buckle had left its mark. "Oh, that. Yeah, I'm fine. Non-drug-related injury," I offered weakly. RG stared hard at me for a few seconds, then shook his head and began leafing through the AMFAR briefing memo. I sat gazing out the window, feeling shell-shocked from my all-star performance. I tried to think about how RG spent most of his time contemplating weighty national policy issues, so there was a small chance that my random drug history confession got instantly forgotten in the company of far more important thoughts. I was a moron. Alarm bells interrupted my descent into a self-hatred spiral as my BlackBerry's calendar reminder function noisily alerted me that it was the 121st anniversary of the Brooklyn Bridge. I silenced the alarm and mentally registered the holiday as RG kept reading. In high school, I'd become intrigued by the big book of holidays that the guidance counselor had left behind her desk. What had started as an art house resolution to celebrate the less popular holidays like Arbor Day and Janitor Appreciation Day had gradually grown into an ongoing fascination with obscure anniversaries. Once I'd embraced the theme, I had found my calendar quickly filled, and the joyous upshot was that every day became a holiday for something. I celebrated them in different small ways, sometimes just by mentally acknowledging them, sometimes by doing more. For example, to celebrate the 14th anniversary of the publication of Deepak Chopra's first book and the subsequent birth of his self-help empire, I treated myself to the new Indian restaurant on DuPont Circle. for the Brooklyn Bridge. Maybe I'd sleep in my I Heart New York onesie. Through the window, I watched the various embassies on Massachusetts Avenue blur past before we turned onto Connecticut Avenue and slowed to a stop next to a crowd of cameras, lobbyists, and AIDS activists. RG put the folder down and closed his eyes. When he reopened them, they were sharp and clear. "Time to work," he said with a genuine energy that impressed me. The least I could do was rally something similar. "Absolutely, sir. This is your crowd." He moved his hand to the door handle and stretched his neck from side to side. "Good job on the talking points," he added. I nodded. I knew they were good, and I'd spent 2 hours on them. "And Samantha," he continued. "Yes, sir." He looked directly at me, the corner of his mouth hinting upwards. "You should really get out more." And he was gone. 100 hands to shake, as many promises to make. I took a second to try to compose myself, feeling more and more certain that it was an unattainable goal. Then I collected my BlackBerry, my briefings, and my bag of pot and followed Senator Gary into the crowd.